Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How's it going? Welcome to our Game of the Year show for 2020. Hope everybody's having a lovely day and hope everybody had a fantastic holiday weekend, or couple weeks, really. I'd like to welcome Alise back to the channel. How's it going, Alise?
Good, you?
Fantastic. So, today, everybody, we've got a couple things lined up for you. One, we have a number of categories that we're going to go through. That's sort of part one of the show, and then we're going to wrap it up with part two, which is going to be our top 5 games of the year.
Yep. Looking forward to it.
Yep.
Hopefully people will get some ideas maybe for games they maybe didn't think about.
Yeah, and I think stuff like the Steam sale and maybe even Epic Game sales are still going on for a couple more days. So let's go ahead and start this off with this question for you, Alise. How was 2020 as far as video games compared to other years?
For me, it was good and bad. I know that's probably like not the answer you want.
No, that's fine.
It was good and bad. There were the good, so I'll take it in turn. Good parts, tons of games, multiple price points, multiple categories, multiple types. There was a game out there for just about everyone this year. We had that last year. This year was as much as last year, I think. So that was great. You could find a game that you liked if you wanted to find a game that you liked.
Mm-hmm.
The bad is, at least I find for myself and kind of my friend group that I play some things with, like long-term game type things and chit chats with people. This year was hard. Just externally was hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mentally tiring. Devs too, things got delayed because of working from home and COVID and everything else. And so games that maybe I would have played normally, I just mentally just didn't want to. Genres that normally did not give me issues this year, I just didn't want to. I had that kind of stuff. So external forces, I do really think, influenced some aspects of my gameplay, and then also just looking at kind of the game journalism, I don't want to say group thing because that's not right, but kind of that whole game journalism, like conversation that happens about, these games are good. And there's a lot of kind of samey every year about people kind of sort out. There's always at least 2 or 3 games that are all on everybody's list this year. And those games oftentimes too do really well. So the ones you expect, the AAA blockbusters, especially maybe with a MCU character, like kills it. And then this year, you didn't see that as much this year. And I just kind of think some of that is that forces beyond your control. People just didn't want to play certain stuff this year because they were tired or stressed or, whatever. Yep. I think COVID has affected lots of things, not just people's health.
Yeah, and I think there's a conversation to be had about how COVID is going to actually affect 2021.
Yep.
Because I think there's a lot of chatter out there about 2021 being a bit of a down year. Although we've still got a bunch of big games that have been announced for this year, whether or not they come out, we don't know.
Right.
I will say here real quick, I think as far as 2020 as a whole, I think it was a really good year for games overall. You go back, the last 3-ish years in particular have been really, really fantastic. And kind of back to what you were saying a little bit about, there was a game for everybody this year, and there isn't just one powerhouse game that's winning every single Game of the Year award. It's not like a God of War year where I think that game just won everything. There's definitely a couple of really strong ones this year that have won a lot, but you look at a lot of the other gaming companies, your IGNs and whatnot, and they're kind of all over the place about what their Game of the Year is, which is really good because it means that there was a lot of good choices this year, which was really cool.
I agree. And I mean, just to build on that, when you have that much variety from a lot of the sources that people use to then decide, right? Because we know there's a nice section of the player base that'll wait till it goes on sale, right? They're not early adopters. They wait until there's a sale and then they go buy, and then they'll also read, oh, what was the Game of the Year? Okay, I guess I'll go buy that. When you have so much variety, that means that more than just the game will get looked at, right? Which I think is good overall for the companies and the people who make those games. So, I mean, that is also a future conversation about how much, the pundits and their opining about XYZ game influences the success or failure of said game. But, that's kind of a separate discussion. But I think it's good. We need more. I think there should be more variety. This shouldn't be, oh, it's a popularity contest, and so that game now is going to be the Game of the Year, and we know it from the day it hits that it's going to be the Game of the Year. I think it's better this way.
Yep. Yeah, there was one conversation that I was going to bring up later, but I think I'm actually going to bring it up now because it kind of mixes in with what we're talking about, and that is sort of the indie game success this year was much higher than what we've seen in previous years, where you have games like Among Us, Fall Guys, Hades, Phasmophobia, among a couple others. It seems like every year you always see at least 1 to 2 indie games that kind of make it big, whether or not it's making it big on Twitch or just a lot of people play it. But this year in particular, those games just exploded on Twitch. And you've got these indie devs, like Among Us as an example, was a team of 3, I think, and then they hired one more. And it's like each one of those devs.
Who, incidentally, the 4th one came from Kit Fox Games.
Oh.
Boyfriend Dungeon, still waiting for it. Okay, please continue.
But no, it's like those guys launched a game and it was immediately dead, 2 or 3 years ago, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And it just happened to be that one streamer, I think it was Soda, who decided to stream that game, and now those devs are all multimillionaires. So it's really interesting to not only see how those games blew up this year in particular, but how there's always the conversation of, well, should we give streamers access to these games? And then sort of that back and forth poll about, is it actually earning devs money? Is it costing them money?
Oh.
And, that conversation. But it's just, like those 4 games in particular just absolutely blew up this year. They were at the top 5, top 10 of Twitch for months in certain cases. And it was just really cool to see little games like that just absolutely exploding. It's been very cool.
And I think I would assume, I know I've seen that conversation happen on a couple of places. The question always is, would those games have blown up if COVID-19 hadn't happened?
Yep.
I mean, that begs the question. And then is that really, then my next thought is that really how we want the games industry? It's an industry. It's bigger than movies and music right now. Do we want to let chance dictate millions of dollars of investment in an industry that is dominating our entertainment choices, like just from a revenue perspective? I don't know. I'm kind of two minds about that, especially when we know it's the first thought is from a consumer's perspective. Oh, well, is it because these games are like the best? Well, if that were true, Among Us wouldn't have been dead 2 years ago, and it didn't change. The only difference was people found out about it. and then started playing it, and then word of mouth pushed, and then more happened. More word of mouth by bigger people with bigger. And is that really how a multi-billion-dollar industry should be run? That Joe whatever on Twitch can make or break a game? I don't know. Like,
By the way, Joe whatever, he's a nice guy.
I'm sure. streamer A, whatever. So yeah. So I yeah, I can see all of those questions, and it makes me interested. But I have been very happy for the indie game circles. They are oftentimes feast or famine. Um, that kind of early days of oil kind of mystique around them happens. What is it? I read somewhere like 500 games a month hit Steam or something like that. And it's like a tiny, tiny,
Yeah.
tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of them ever actually go on to make a profit. I mean, it's tiny. We're not talking about, 20%. We're talking like tiny percentage. And it's not free to make a game. So, and many times those people are paying completely out of their pocket. I don't, do you, can, what's the, small business funding for game studios? I don't even know what that is, if there is any. So,
Yeah.
um, I'm very happy that there's been more variety this year, but I worry sometimes about my favorite hobby and sustainability.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where it goes and then what the future holds for games, because there's so many topics that we could talk about around that subject. I mean, another one that popped up this year was they're saying that, all right, $60 doesn't cut it anymore. We're raising our prices to $70-$80 for AAAs now.
Yep.
And I think 2021 we're going to see at least a couple companies try it. So what we had to watch and see what happens with that. And
Well, they already are kind of doing it already.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so they're hitting the whales, and those are those of us who pre-order. I have cut down my pre-ordering by a considerable amount over the last couple of years. But how many of us who pre-order get just the standard edition? I mean, really, if you're going to go and pre-order, most of us, at least that I know of, that pre-order don't get the standard edition. You're getting the deluxe edition.
Mm-hmm.
Is a couple of digital outfits in your game that worth $10, $15, 20 extra dollars? Really? And most of the games that I play, I can remember I pre-ordered the like exceptional deluxe edition in both Andromeda and Inquisition. I just didn't get the one with the tarot cards, which I'm kicking myself badly over. I should have got that one. I out-leveled them outfits in like a hot minute in both those games.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it really is a fear of missing out stuff that they get us with. You buy it. Now, the Stadia one for Cyberpunk 2077 was actually great because you got the controller and the Chromecast with it. That was great. So that one I didn't feel bad about. But yeah, I mean, but they're already doing it, and people are paying it. $70 for the deluxe edition, $80 for the deluxe edition. Would I pay $90 for Andromeda so that I would get booster packs for the multiplayer to get more? I got starter packs, like whatever, to get more guns and whatever. And some people got a remote control car with that. Like,
oh yeah,
and then I found that remote control car. I should have bought it at the Best Buy for like $40. But later on. Anyway, yeah, so I do think they're going to try it. And then you're going to have the Jim Sterlings come back and go, you guys are nuts. Just how about quit spending, wasting money, which is the other argument, right?
Mm-hmm.
and stop promising all this money to your investors. And how about stop going public with your company so that you have to pay these investors all this money, and then you'll be fine, right? With the truth, I'm sure, is somewhere in the middle. So who knows? But
Yep.
yeah, I want to see who goes there first. I really do. Who is it that said? What studio said they were going to be doing a $80 game or a $70 game? Somebody went out and said they were going to
I
do the
want to
next
say off the top of my head it was 2K with the next
one. Ooh.
NBA game.
I mean, really, is that game really worth $80? Really? All they do is change the dude's pants and take out like the players that retired or whatever and put the rookies in. They don't change. How much are they changing underneath the hood of that game?
Yep.
Really? $80? Well, I mean, you already have to pay a whole bunch of money to get a haircut in that game. So, yeah, I don't understand sports game players, but I still have to shell out money for my kid to be able to play his sports game, but whatever.
Yep. So yeah, there was a lot of really interesting subjects that came out of 2020 regarding gaming and the gaming industry, and yeah, we could do multiple shows just talking about some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're gonna go ahead and move on to our categories just to kind of get that rolling chat. So we've got just kind of go down the list of what categories we have this year. We have best graphics artistic, best graphics technical, best music soundtrack, dark horse, best game you didn't play, best ongoing game, and then most anticipated for 2021. So we're going to start with the art categories. And the baseline difference between artistic and technical, and of course what one person thinks is artistic and versus another's, completely, your opinion and all that stuff. But generally, when we're looking for best graphics artistic, we're looking for something that has like a nice art style to it or something along those lines, where best technical is something more on the lines of like realism, mocap, and kind of stuff like that. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of where we're going for this. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and start out with best graphics artistic. And Alise, I will let you fire off this one.
Okay, it's Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Gorgeous game. This game is so pretty. The first one was really pretty. This one is still as pretty. I put this in the artistic category because it really does have a stylistic quality to it. It's almost like a photorealist, though, like artistic style. I don't know how to describe it any better. The game is just gorgeous. And that is probably the biggest thing that I like about it, is that it's just pretty to play.
Yeah, those are two games that I've never really had a chance to get into.
They're platformers. They're actually kind of hard platformers. Unraveled is another one that is also kind of a hard platformer. I had to have my kid help me play this game multiple times. But again, just you can fly this year. They added the flying mechanic this year, which was, I believe, was new from last year. I don't remember us having that exactly last year. They don't have talking. It's some text based. The characters do this kind of like,
isn't it kind of like
yeah,
something like that?
Yeah, each character has its own like, mumbly Charlie Brown teacher kind of voice, but each character has a distinct like timbre and pitch, so you can it switches each time they do the mumble talk, so they're still trying to get you to pay attention to the story. It's kind of nice in that it's a text-based game, and something that is as pretty and the graphics are as computer generated kind of style, as opposed to a pixelated Stardew Valley. You expect text there, right? Not so much in something like this, but if you want to play a game that's really pretty, the first game was great. I think it was on multiple people's Game of the Years. This game is also in many people's, if not top 5, top 10 lists for this year. And you're going to hear me say this again, and I should have made this also a dark horse, but it's not a game, so I can't. But Game Pass, if you have it on Xbox, you can play this game for free. And I would say Game Pass is the dark horse of this year.
Oh, yes.
But it's not a game, so I didn't put it down. But there's multiple ones on my list, actually, that are Game Pass games. So just saying, if you have it, give it a try. If you don't like it, you're not out anything. It's free.
Yep, Game Pass, hands down the best deal in gaming. Even for PC. And I know in 2021 they're expanding the PC version. So,
yeah. And I mean, they've integrated EA Origin, EA Origin, all those games in there too. And I was paying for both Game Pass and EA Access on my Xbox. And now I don't have to pay for that, which makes me exceptionally happy because I was paying for it on 2 platforms. And I may get to get rid of both of them at some point. So, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting, I think maybe this year when Microsoft, and I don't know if it's in beta right now, but the Microsoft version of Stadia.
Yeah.
When that, beta. I guess, when that fully comes out and you have access to Game Pass anywhere, that's gonna be something.
Yep. I will be very excited to try both. Because I'm a Game Pass premium, whatever, the more expensive version of Game Pass, whatever. I think we have access to the beta, and then I think other people have been invited. But I'll be very excited to try both, being that I feel like I'm fairly experienced with Stadia, and be able to actually play that and see which one. I don't want to say better, because really Stadia has its place, and most of the people who have written it off don't accurately evaluate what that place is. They don't really see who it's good for. It'll be interesting to see whether or not Game Pass ends up, or the xCloud ends up being kind of a Swiss Army knife. I don't think it's going to be. I think it's still going to have a population of people that it's for, but we'll see. The Steam version also, that's been out for how long? Also was supposed to be the second coming of game streaming, and it has kind of fallen off just because of the way that they structured it. So it'll be interesting how to see that actually rolls out and what the actual story is when it hits. We'll see.
Yeah, and just briefly going back to Stadia for a second, Stadia got a pretty positive boost from Cyberpunk, because it turns out Cyberpunk best plays on Stadia.
So. Yeah. Yep, that's why I'm not hating Cyberpunk, at least for performance-wise right now, unlike many, because I didn't have not one bit of trouble, and I had like this many bugs that I saw. Or that impacted my gameplay at all. So I was very happy that Stadia at least finally got a chance to go, hey, we can actually do something right. Yes, we've screwed up many times in this rollout, but hey, the back end is great over here. So it's great.
Well, switching over to, or go ahead.
No, please.
Okay.
Let's hear about what your best graphics game is.
Yep.
I'm excited.
So yeah, my best graphics artistic, and I'm sure this isn't going to surprise my chat, but hey, Hades. There was a couple other games, like I thought Haven was really strong in this category. and a couple others, but in the end, I had to give it to Hades because again, here you got a small indie team that's put together one of the best games this year, and this game actually has multiple art styles within it, which is pretty cool and maybe a little bit unusual. So you obviously have the game itself, and then whenever you do a conversation in this game, it comes up with the artwork of the god, Aphrodite, Zeus, whoever. And that's the one thing that I've seen a lot on Twitter, and the art community has really jumped behind. Actually, you can see Zagreus still right there for a second. But they've just talked about, how much they love the artwork in this game, and the art community has kind of taken over and making their own things. And yeah, just this is a standout for me this year when it comes to the art category.
Mm-hmm. I think it's not the same. Well, I mean, let's just talk about the studio itself. Has always had a very strong,
yes,
unique art style in all of the games that they've made.
Yep, Supergiant.
Mm-hmm. So this is no different. Now, I have to say, I've just seen gameplay. I have not actually played Hades. But I expected no less, I guess, out of the studio when it hit. And I didn't know about the different art styles. So that's new. But What Remains of Edith Finch had multiple different art styles too, because it was like a chapter, and it was always like a new developer made each chapter. So they deliberately made each chapter of that game different. So it's kind of cool that we have that kind of out there for other studios to, stretch their legs a little bit. I love to see some variation and difference and not samey photorealistic.
Yep. And yeah, and actually, Haven has kind of the same thing. And from what I remember, Haven has like 3 different art styles, from what I remember. So again, you got like the world and the characters like flying around. And then when they would come up and talk, and it did like the side-by-side thing, it was almost like an anime. It's
anime.
And then there was a third one, but I can't remember off the top of my head what that third style is. Oh, I think it was the watercolor style that they did in like all their trailers for the game. And they also online, they released all the music, and they did these watercolor things for all their music and stuff.
I remember the trailer sort of, but not really well. But yeah, absolutely. The anime thing, and then the kind of real-time combat, more kind of photorealistic, like cartoony art style was I was unprepared for the anime part. Started playing that game. But yeah.
Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll move on to Best Graphics Technical. And in this case, we actually matched. I think this is the only one that we actually agreed.
I think so. I mean, we had some similar ones, I think, in the final lists. We at least had, I think, at least one game, if not 2, I don't know, that we agreed on. But yes, this category, this game, yep.
So I'll let you unveil this one.
Oh, you want me to do it? Oh,
Sure.
I'm sorry. I didn't pick that up. It's The Last of Us Part 2. This game is beautiful in a different way than Ori, but still beautiful. The sunsets, the leaves on the trees, the grass, the movement of the horses. Then they did something really cool that seems so innocuous, but is the first time I've ever actually seen it done in a game. So when you see that, you know it had to have been hard because nobody's actually done it before, but it was the rope mechanic where you throw the rope over things. If we're talking about like the mocap and just the back end graphic stuff for gameplay, that is like so hard. I saw so many developers talk about how amazed they were that they put that in the game because it's actually really hard to pull off. And it never glitched when I played it. So It was just cool being able to throw this rope. You couldn't just willy-nilly throw it, but you could throw it just about anywhere that logically made sense for the rope to go when you had it available to you. So just all of that was beautiful. The voice acting in the game is great, and so there was never any I never saw any out of sync stuff. And then also the thing that needs to be mentioned with this game, which I give it props for, the accessibility. It was talked a lot about at the beginning, but then it kind of fell off later on. People talking about it. But the accessibility options in this game were just great. You could have it read the text to you and describe stuff. They had colorblind mode. It was almost overwhelming. You could turn on and have the sound when it could ping you if you got close to resources and stuff you're supposed to be finding in the game. They tried very hard to make as many people as possible that wanted to play this game could play the game. Now, again, to be fair, I still was hearing from people who have very serious limitations being able to play that they still struggled playing the game. So it wasn't perfect, but lots of strides forward. That is part of the graphics really most of the time. Props to Naughty Dog for pushing the envelope on those things.
Yep. And I think the biggest surprise here for so many people was the fact that we're not looking at a PC game here. This is a PS4
exclusive.
Yes. And the fact that it, for us, this was the number one in this category. For many others, this was the number one in this category. And when you talk about, what game could have taken number two, you can look at something like Ghost of Tsushima or maybe Cyberpunk with RTX. But again, this game and Ghost of Tsushima, two of the best looking games this year on old hardware, essentially.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy.
Yeah. Yep. So, yep. You want to play a pretty game.
But it's definitely cool that we have the new consoles out now, and here in a couple of years, I think we are going to see the best looking games we've ever seen. I mean, now that, for those of us who are hardcore PC, most games are made for the consoles and then ported over, via some method, but we're still mostly limited to what the consoles can do.
Except for Cyberpunk 2077. Oh, I said that out loud. Sorry. Please continue. Just I had to swing away at that one. Okay. Yep. Keep going.
But no, it's just cool that these games look as cool as or as good as they do on this older hardware, and it's a little bit hard to believe that they were able to pull off what they were able to.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And it's kind of funny. You mentioned when we were talking a little while ago, Rami, I just noticed he made a comment chastising PC players for not telling the console players how much better playing Destiny 2 is at 60 FPS. He said he has a PS5 and now Destiny plays at 60 FPS on the PS5. And so he was like, wow, you guys didn't tell us. And I expect to see more of that kind of thing where console players are going to be like, wow, this is what the whole PC master race has been about. And now PC, games that play primarily on PC, they're going to have to step up their game because people are paying how much money for a graphics card with XYZ do hickey bells and whistles. They expect to get their money's worth out of that when they fire up a game. And that's another discussion about how that's going to affect games per platform, and are people is the video card arms race getting ready to get started? Who knows? But
yep. Well, we'll go ahead and switch on over to our next category, which is Best Music Soundtrack. And for me, this was the hardest category this year because this was an outstanding year for music.
Yeah.
On multiple levels, where you have something like the game we were just watching, Last of Us 2, which is most of the time like a single guitar going, or maybe a couple of guitars going, where you've got stuff like, and we've mentioned Haven earlier, and that game has a really cool soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like Doom, which is just hard rock and roll. Hades is similar to that. But just a wide variety of music across multiple games is like, where do you even go with this?
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and I'll start this one.
Please do.
Since I just kind of mentioned it. And that is my game for best music soundtrack is, and I know it's gonna be a shocker, chat, but Hades. So the cool thing about this game is I've described this a couple different times, where I swear the soundtrack for Hades is almost like the old SNL skit with and you might have to help me with this, Alise, because the name is escaping me.
Okay.
The old SNL skit with Wayne and Garth.
Uh-huh.
What's that one called?
Oh my God. And you infected me. It's Wayne's World.
Wayne's World, there you go. So basically the soundtrack for Hades is like a couple guys in their basement just trying to outdo each other with guitars. So you got one guy like on the bass, one guy just, trying something crazy. And so it's like you'll be running through the world of Hades, and then sometimes there's just a bum, 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 bum going. And then all of a sudden you launch into a boss fight, and all of a sudden it's like, all right, full on like hard rock and roll. And it's just like, it's really cool because the theme of this game is obviously all about the Greek gods and stuff like that. And you wouldn't think that a rock and roll track would necessarily work for a game like this, but it does because it's an ARPG. So it's all about how fast can you kill these guys with the music going, and there's a lot of really great tracks. There's I think only a couple of soundtracks that I downloaded this year, and this was one of them.
Mm.
But just absolutely fantastic music, again, coming from an indie studio.
That's always awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to just preface and say my original, I changed this actually to my winner of this category from The Last of Us 2, like Kidley mentioned. Mostly because I just felt out of the game, most of the games that I played this year were very kind of classically or folky or, whatever. And this game with the rock soundtrack was just a little bit of an outlier for me. So I like difference. I like the outliers always draw my attention. So mine is Doom Eternal. A lot of people forgotten about this game. It came out right before COVID exploded in the United States. And it's a great game. And the soundtrack is all, so if you play Doom from a few years ago, they carried on the theme to Doom Eternal with the hard rock, thumping 80s music.
And what's the tagline for this game?
Oh, God.
Rip and tear?
Yes. Okay. I was like, oh, my God, trick question. What? Yeah. So you're out there and it fits because you're just killing demons. And you've got a chainsaw like melee weapon. I mean, it just kind of fits. And And it isn't that one game. What is that game? I'm having a moment where I can't remember. So you'll have to help me, Kidley. There are times when you're shooting stuff and the music feels like it's that game. You know that game that they're trying to make where you shoot in time with the beat and it increases your damage. It's not happening in Doom, but you kind of end up doing that while you're
Mm-hmm.
playing. Um, just because of the soundtrack. So it's really good. I think they've released it as well for download. I feel like somebody will have to check on that. But if you like, rock, hairband rock, whatever, um, this would be a good one to have. It's certainly got me to be able to shoot a little bit faster. So if you need to focus at work, get some stuff done, Doom Eternal soundtrack might be for you.
Yeah, I know that other game you're talking about. I don't know what the name is.
Right?
But
We
yeah, it's
watched
a.
it at E3 and we had a chit chat about it.
Mm,
And Troy Baker is doing something with it. Like he's like not just doing the voice acting, but he's like doing stuff behind the like in the not the front office, but you know what I mean. Like he's some design thing with it because of the music piece. But that'll be interesting. But there's almost like they tried to match you like shooting stuff a lot with the music selection. So I find all that fun. So
mm-hmm.
Doom Eternal.
All right. We'll move on to our next category. And this category is what we call Dark Horse. And you can kind of take this one a couple different ways, but it's essentially, and next year we might have to change this. If make it so that it doesn't necessarily have to be a game, but it's something that basically it's a game that sort of surprised you this year is sort of the best way of saying that. So I'll let you start with this one.
Okay. Oh, all right. It's me. I'm sorry. Haven. Okay, so there has to be a little story with this prior to. Kidley and I think JT, right? Was that
Yeah, I think so.
We watched this during E3, I think, right? I think.
Yeah, I popped up a couple times. Yeah.
And I know last year's E3 and I think the year before, there was just, depending on which presentation you watched, just like an overwhelming amount of indie games that very much felt the same. Maybe that was just me. I'm not going to say Kidley felt this way or JT or anybody else felt this way, but like just the trailers all looked the same. And so I just kind of in one ear and out the other with those. Then Kidley goes, hey, you might want to actually take a look at this game because it kind of might be you. And I went, oh, so I go fire it up. And Kidley also knows that I've been desperately waiting for Boyfriend Dungeon to come out, which is a dungeon crawler dating sim. And they've delayed it and delayed it. It was supposed to come out this year. It didn't. It's still on their website saying they're releasing in 2020. 2020 is over. It didn't. They lost their community manager to Among Us. So I don't even know if it's coming out. So point is, I've been bereft. And then Haven actually kind of filled in that blank. It is a anime. We talked about it a little earlier, kind of a combination of two different art styles. But it kind of separated itself from the pack for me because of that whole, the relationship, and you have that chit chat between the kind of relationship character development between the two leads because they're romantically linked. So there's a little, Romeo and Juliet kind of background there with the two of them. And just it just kind of hit a lot of bells for me. And it's on Game Pass.
Hey.
So you can give it a try. And, so for me, I think all those things together make it a dark horse. Different kind of art style, different approach for storytelling. It's text-based and talk. The anime telling style, I don't like anime, but it's okay in this game because everything else is good for me. And it's on Game Pass, so the exposure was more. I think this actually got some chit chat in the. I think Haven got some exposure from multiple different game journalism outlets this year too, and I really think all of that together is due to all those factors playing in. Because again, so many indie games came out this year. So many indie games came out last year. Dating sims, especially, are quite common in the indie space, and visual novels. So it's kind of a combination between a very light combat game and a visual novel at parts with the anime sections. It's great. So highly recommend. Very unusual approach to game design. I love unusual approaches, so I'm very glad that Kid Lee poked me and said, hey, you better go check out this game. If it weren't for my one big indie game that's on my list, this might have made my top 5.
So a couple things about this. I have not beat this yet. I think I'm close. Have you beat it yet?
No.
Okay. So yeah, a couple things I wanted to point out on this, because this game definitely does some stuff that I've never seen before. First of all, the movement system in relation with the music, I think, is one of the coolest movement systems I've seen. It's almost like you're on a pair of like rollerblades, just like, going through the levels, and it seemed really cool to me. And then the other thing is the combat system is very unique. I've not seen another combat system that's quite like that. It's still essentially a real-time combat system, and they've kind of stripped it down so it's a little bit more simple, even though later on it does get more complex.
You think it's a real-time combat system? I think it's more KOTOR-ish, where it's turn-based, but it happens so quickly. Because I had to, when you're playing with the two characters, each character has to contribute to the battle, otherwise you end up dying.
Mm-hmm.
So do you know what I mean? Like, you have to queue up this one, and then they have to queue up this responding one, or else you get owned. I died the first couple of times I played, and they say at the beginning of the game, combat isn't hard, you should play it at normal and not easy. Like, that's what the game says to you when you fire it up. So but you really do need to, do you see what I'm saying? Like, yeah. I agree with you. It doesn't, you're not stopping and then waiting for this to happen, but there is this kind of play between the two characters that you have to execute. I think it would be more fun playing with someone else, and I couldn't talk my kids into playing it with me. So
yeah, but yeah, it's got it's also got combo moves, and it kind of reminded me of Dragon Ball Z a little bit, where you're combining like your power attacks, and then later on you can get shields and buffs and all kinds of stuff.
And each character has like a specialization, right? The girl is more of the tanky whatever, and the boy is more of the finessey kind of magic-y techie. That's at least how it felt to me.
Yeah.
When you were looking at their abilities and what you could spec out. That was totally, really true. Okay, I'm sorry. I keep taking over your comments. Please go.
No, you're fine.
So, yes.
I guess the one last thing I will say on Haven is apparently the composer for the game is fairly well known, and when the soundtrack came out, everybody was just like, oh, it's so good and he's so amazing. And
I mean, I thought the soundtrack was great, but um, I was not enticed to download it myself. I mean, I think it was great, but it wasn't something that I was like, oh, let me play this.
But yeah, from what I've read, apparently just that style is like his style. So there were people who didn't even know he was attached to this game, but then they either played the game or heard the soundtrack and they're like, oh, it's this person.
I see.
But
yeah, it would be like if Elton John like did the music for, or you know, Eric Clapton for The Last of Us 2.
Yep.
For, you know, the soundtrack. It had a very like Eric Clapton kind of a feel to that soundtrack, and I could see someone like, yeah, getting it. Yeah. I understand. So what's yours?
Yeah, so my dark horse is Crusader Kings 3. And I don't have too much to say about this, other than the fact that I've always been a big fan of these strategy type games. I had never played the first two, and then this is another game that I think we may have seen during some of the E3 coverage. I don't know if it was this year or last year.
It sounds familiar.
And I'm like, you know what? I'll give it a try. And then it ended up being really good. And then later on, just watching other people and listening to the chatter about this game, it's really crazy just what you can do with it. And for those who don't know, it's essentially a kingdom-based simulator, but it's also like the entire world. So it's like you get to say, oh, I'm going to start out as Scotland or whatever, and you're controlling the king, but you're also controlling the entire family line. So it can go on for hundreds and hundreds of years, and then it's like, oh, your king gets married to, you know, some lady, and you guys have kids, and you can name the kid and teach the kid stuff, and then the father gets assassinated, and now the kid is the king, and it's just snowballs from there. So it's a really interesting game with a lot of options. It's what they refer to as a grand strategy, I believe.
Oh. There's terms for the strategy gaming community.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I am not educated at all in that particular genre.
And it goes actually pretty deep for a medieval simulator, too. It's like you can go ahead and, let's say, raid a town, and you're like, there's the king's newborn son. I'm going to throw him in jail. You know, stuff like that.
Harsh.
Yeah.
A baby in jail? Oh.
I'm going to throw that baby in jail.
For shame. I guess people should be jerky in video games and not in real life.
Yep. Well, our next category is always a fun one. Best game you didn't play.
Okay. I'm going to assume I'm going first.
Sure. Good.
All right. Mine is Assassin's Creed Valhalla. There's a story here. I had been looking forward to this game for a while. Played Odyssey, thought it was great. I think Kidley and I both have gone on and on about Odyssey because I think it was on both of our best of the years last year.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago. I think it was my game of the year.
Okay. So, and I can't remember if it was mine or not. I feel like it wasn't, but I can't remember. It got time for me to actually like buy this game, and I put it off, and then I put it off, and then I realized that I could not play mentally. I could not play two big giant video games at the same time, and so I had to choose between Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Watch Dogs Legion, and Cyberpunk 2077. And I literally spent 2 days having a chit chat with my co-host, my podcast co-host, about the pros and cons, like almost like list level of pros and cons of each game, because I cannot do a big giant game again. Like I'm tired. And when you see my best of the year games, there is a theme, and most of it is doable in a couple of weekends theme, because I just mentally could not handle it. I was having to fight myself all the time to not go to my comfort games. We all have some game that when we don't know what to play, and we're not feeling whatever's on the table, we fire up our comfort game. And I had to stop myself multiple times this year to not do that. So I did not play Valhalla. So there it is. It's a good game. I'm looking forward to getting to it at some point. But it wasn't in 2020.
Yeah. And you actually bring up another really good point there, and we could do an entire show on that, and that's game length. Because you look at Valhalla, and Valhalla's around 100 hours. And you look at Ghost of Tsushima, which is around 60-ish. Watch Dogs Legion is in that ballpark. Cyberpunk is in that ballpark. And it's like, at the end of the year, it's just all of a sudden there's all these 50-plus hour games.
Yep.
And it's like, you can't get them all done. It's impossible.
And then they add, I mean, you talk about Tsushima. I mean, there's multiplayer content now in that game. So, you know, and then they add additional like DLC. We're not even talking about DLCs yet. In Valhalla, it's integrated in the game. There will be DLC. Like that's what they do. They're like Borderlands. They're like Borderlands with that. So you're signing up for the first chapter when you buy that game. Really. So I just mentally just could not do multiple big giant huge games. So I had to choose, and sadly Valhalla drew the short straw. And Watch Dogs Legion had some issues on launch, so I sat on that one because I wanted to see them fix it first before I dove in. So
yeah, and actually, Line Walker in chat just reminded me of something that's worth talking about. I made the mistake, I guess, if you want to call it that, of trying to do Valhalla and Tsushima at the same time. And the funny thing is the controls in those two games are almost identical.
Oh.
Even like really? This button for the horse, this button for parry. But then there's just a couple of them that are different. And so when I would swap games, I would constantly be hitting the wrong ones. So I was just like, I
can't imagine you just not getting overwhelmed with the amount of stuff you have to do to get through both games. Like it would feel like a second job to do both of those games to me at the same time. For me, Tsushima's an experience. Like, you need to be in a frame of mind. It is trying to put you in a frame of mind while you play that game, and we'll get into that later. And for me, that would just blow it up for me. I would be like, oh my god, I gotta get no, thank you. But hats off to you for attempting it or pulling it off, or whatever.
Still haven't beaten either of them.
Same, although I'm close.
Yeah. I did the thing where I knew this show was coming up, and I think I had 50 hours in Valhalla, and I'm like, all right, I've got to play Ghost of Tsushima.
Yep.
And so now I think I'm 30-ish hours into Tsushima, so I'm like half done.
Yep.
Give or take.
Yeah, and that whole thing is another topic, but that's what happens when you have these huge games that come out, and and we won't get into the discussion, but the whole concept of player value and what they consider a value for their $60 or whatever, and it's going to get worse if they try and push 80 and then bloat, and then there's issues with okay, I'm just going to go down the thing. But
That's
anyway, yes. So Valhalla, gonna play it, haven't played it yet.
well, my best game that I didn't play. This actually hurts me kind of a little bit because because Spider-Man PS4 was my number 2 game the year that it came out. That was also the Odyssey year, but it earned a spot in my like top 5 all-time games. I love Spider-Man PS4.
It's a good game.
And the fact that I couldn't play Miles Morales because I didn't have a PS5, I didn't want to play the PS4 version because the PS5 version, has better frame rate and ray tracing and all that. So I'm like, I want that experience. I want to wait. But everything I've heard from Miles Morales is that it's absolutely fantastic.
I don't want to say anything else because
I think a lot of people are kind of mad that it was too short. They would have wished that it was actually a full, 25 plus hour game instead of being about 10. Yeah. But other than that, it, as soon as
very familiar to the first one, it's very familiar to the first one. So,
But yeah, as soon as I can find a PS5, then I will be streaming this. And I think next year we might have to either come up with a category or change up our rules a little bit, because I think we both had games this year because of either not being able to get one of the new systems or whatever that we couldn't play. So next year we might have to do something like, here's a 2020 game that I couldn't get to, and I don't know, something.
Oh, I played it 2021 because I couldn't play it in 2022. Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah, something like that. So
best 2020 game I had to play in 2021. Yeah, that would be fun.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to our next category, and this is always a fun one. And funny enough, in this category, we're not going with our usual answers, I feel like. So
no.
The next category is best ongoing game.
Mm-hmm.
So
now for me, I interpreted this very strictly to kind of the rules of the show, which is a game that came out in 2020, which in the past I've argued that's silly for ongoing games. I didn't say silly. It's a little harsh, but it's unfair maybe to a new game. And this game is not officially released yet. It's in early access. However, I really like where they're going with this. It's a very well-known studio. I played it with both my kids, which is a theme for 2020 as well, I would like to say. That not only have I said this, but I've seen it mentioned by other game pundits / journalists / opinion writers, that this year was kind of the year of the family game for many people. So I played this game and both my kids and I all found something different that we really enjoyed about the game. They have added more content to it, and it's grounded. So I think originally they said when you would look it up on its website, the release date was originally listed as July 2020, but they have since changed that. I don't know if they were attempting to get it out in 2020 and just realized that they can't release it in the state they wanted to release it in. I don't know. We finished the main campaign. I'm doing air quotes here. It was ridiculously short because, again, I think we got that done in like 5 hours because it's early access, right? So they've been focusing on a lot of the kind of supportive stuff, but it's grounded. It's by Obsidian, For those of you who know studios, um, Obsidian did Outer Worlds last year. Last year, it's
Hmm.
a tiny team inside Obsidian. So I actually got to go to the panel for this game at PAX before the world blew up. Um, and it was really cool to listen to them. They were like, "We like survival games, and we just kind of did this on the side." And it's like 6 of them or something within Obsidian. It might be bigger now. The team might be bigger now, but it's still like a handful. It's not 200 people. It's that decided to make basically it's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids meets Stardew Valley meets Minecraft without the pixelation. It's a farming sim, it's a survival game, and you're these tiny people from the 80s. Kids, you're kids. Um, and there's a little, and you see the hints of its pedigree of being an Obsidian game. The humor is very much there. Um, but you're this tiny thing and you have these big giant stalks of grass that you have to make stuff out of to survive. um, my kids and we decided to be close to water thinking that would be good, and we had to go for the main quest and where some of the more rare materials were, so that's where we built our house. Wrong move, because that's where all the spiders are, and the spiders are these big huge things that wreck you. No matter, like, you have to be really high level with really good like armor to not get wrecked by the spiders, like one shot wreck. So we had to abandon our first whatever. You couldn't swim at the beginning. Now you can, and they added a koi pond with fish, but the spiders still come after you in the water. I look askance at that,
Yeah, and
Obsidian.
it
If you ever
it
listen
should be
to
noted here
this.
real quick that they put in an arachnophobia slider for this game.
Yes. Yes. A lot of their like stuff that they've done with this game is really, really cute. I'm really looking forward to see where they take it. And being that it's Obsidian, who is now owned by Microsoft, I am not worried about them abandoning the game before it hits actual release. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do, and the fact that my kids and I all played it together. They do have a multiplayer mode. I can't remember for sure if it's active now or not. I feel like it is,
I
but
think it is, yeah.
don't burn me if it's not. We didn't play it multiplayer because we only have the one Xbox and it's not couch co op. So I wish it was. I think the game would be freaking amazing if it was couch co op. But we only have the one Xbox. So we just basically, everybody trades the controller and we would help strategize and then yell, Spire when, whatever. But it really is a nice family game that has something that everybody, my daughter loves the farming sim place, and she would do that part. My son likes the combat part, and I like the story part. So all of us together, there was something for us all that we could focus on, and it was really nice. And we completed the majority of the what they had at the time in a couple of weekends. I haven't played since they added the new content. I'll get back to it. But yeah, I think you should check out Grounded if that's sounds like something you're interested in.
Yeah. Yeah, for me this is one of these games where I took a look at it and I'm like, this game is going to be great. And so I'm like, I don't want to touch it until it's fully released. But I know another funny thing about this game is I saw so many comments. People are like, Obsidian, give us the option to hug the bugs.
Yeah.
If you
I
don't,
mean, why?
I want to hug the ladybugs
Oh,
and the ants.
oh, come on, man. Everything can't be hug.
Yeah.
You can have a pet mite, spider mite or something, I think.
Is that the little green ones?
Um I think it's either that or the fluffy ones. But one of them you can have, we didn't do that, but I know one of them you can farm for resources. I think it's the little green bugs. Um But I mean, there's a combat. You don't want to pet the things in Stardew Valley that you go kill in the caves. So, whatever. But also the commercials for this game, again, Obsidian is known for their sense of humor in their games. And the commercials for this game, do you remember, Kidley, what I'm talking about? Like the one, they're like, if you're looking for for Grounded, where they had that back and forth with the Cyberpunk people.
Oh,
If
right.
you're looking for the big game of the year, go play Cyberpunk 2077. But if you want to play, you want to fight spiders, or I can't remember, they said something, then play Grounded. It was just, they had like a couple of the commercials were just really, or trailers were really cute. And then like Cyberpunk like tweeted back at the Grounded people with the 2 eye emojis on their thing. It was just, Obsidian has a special place in my heart, along with Bethesda or BioWare. So I am biased, I'll admit, but I think the game is going to be really great once they get even more content out that you can sit down and just, go. And they're getting there. But again, it's like this tiny, tiny team. And they're working on some big game too.
Avowed.
So,
yep.
Yes. At the same time, so I imagine they're just kind of, getting pulled off and then going back and, whatever. And you have to admire that Obsidian is letting them do this little, passion project on the side. And so here you go, Grounded.
Yeah, and that's kind of how Blizzard was with Hearthstone. Hearthstone was just a little little side project by a couple of the devs, and then now it blew up, and it's a multi-million-dollar game for them.
Right.
So you just never know.
And there's something to be said. Google has done multiple things. Like there's a whole bunch of apps that were passion projects for Google devs because the company builds in time for them to take some. It's like I've read somewhere that they build in time for them to mess around on, passion projects. And some of those passion projects have actually turned into like things. I think the assistant was one of them that somebody just went off and was like, hey, can we make something like Siri? And boom, here you go. And there's a couple others that I've heard about that turned into these big, huge things for them that were just side projects. So I think we should see more of that. It's just, oh my gosh, the amount of money and manpower that it takes to make any big, huge AAA. You just don't see it out of the AAA studios, I guess is my point. Especially Obsidian being an independent studio at that, which that's a whole other show about how that's different when you were an independent studio. They did this, I believe, prior to them getting acquired by Microsoft. Yeah, it's a little different for them.
But yeah, that game looks great, and we'll have to see. Hopefully it releases this year at some point, and hopefully it takes off for them.
They said 2021, so I'm going to knock on some wood here that happens.
All right, my best ongoing game. This is definitely a little bit of a surprise, and kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, because we've done this category in previous years. And usually it ends up being like Destiny or Warframe or Path of Exile or something along those lines.
Well known.
Yep, it's a well-known ones. But we have another well-known company and another well-known game that did something different this year, which is a little bit of a surprise. And I'm talking about Civilization 6. So I don't know if this was because of COVID or what, but they decided to do monthly updates for this game. Some of the stuff was free, some of it was part of their season pass thing, but they added in so many new features, so many new modes. They've been updating the map system, more civilizations, and then they've been taking just like community feedback. And then every single month they release a video and they're like, all right, next month we're doing this. And then here's our community feedback section. You guys said you wanted this and this and this. All right, we're going to add it in. Maybe this thing is too strong. Maybe we need to do this or that. And so it's been really cool to see them do that years after this game has been released. And to my knowledge, they have never done anything like this before. I mean, we do get the normal Civ expansions and stuff like that, but nothing like these monthly updates, these monthly videos, and just the constant changes to the game. It's like they're trying to take Civ and instead of being a game like, okay, it's released, expansion done, they're trying to turn it into, a game that everybody's playing and they're playing with their friends, they're playing online, almost like a Destiny Division style game, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we all know, right? I mean, it's been said multiple times, including from the CEO of EA, right? That the games with the tails make the most money. So I wonder if the front office, that is, who's the developer again? I can see it's CA, right?
For Civ?
Yeah. Who's the developer for Civilization?
I want to say Fraxis.
Is it? Oh.
Unless I'm thinking of something. Well, I mean, it's Sid. See, now I need to look it up just to verify.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's Fraxis. Yep.
Okay. I mean, they probably have tried to figure out a way to be able to do that. I mean, if you can make it work without making your community mad, I say you go for it. Mm-hmm. It's just, you need to make sure you balance that. And then what they're doing sounds very much like what Bungie does for Destiny. It gets shortened by the content creators to TWAB, and actually now they call it TWAB, but it's This Week at Bungie.
Oh.
So they announce, what's coming, what they're doing, what people have talked about, and whatever. And then the game director comes out. Overwatch does it too, right? I think it's really something that really should be done more commonly, especially for these long, these ongoing games, right? Mm-hmm. Because community engagement is so important to their funding stream, let alone the playability of the game, right? For at least for the Destinies anyway, where you have to have a certain number of people to make the game fun and work. Community engagement is so important, and it's great to have a community manager, but actually making the community feel like you're listening. Mm-hmm. And here's my proof that I'm listening to you. You said these things on your feet, and here we're gonna, we listened to you. All of that stuff I think is great, especially for these ongoing games. So, more power to Civ. That game came out 3 years ago, 2 years ago,
something like that. Yeah.
You know what? You go. That's what I say.
And I've said for a while as well, kind of just repeating a little bit of what you said, that any developer, if you have an ongoing game, if you're making a game or whatever, you should be doing live streams all the time. So we look at Ashes of Creation, which is a new MMO that's coming out. It's probably not going to be out for 2 years. And I think they do weekly live streams on that game. Just development updates, here's concept art. And then you look at something like Warframe, they stream 3-4 times a week, the devs?
They do one per platform. Then they have one for everybody. Then they have a developer stream every 2 weeks.
Yep.
Which the game director and the combat director and Rebecca is the live ops chief, mm-hmm. but she's also sort of kind of the community manager lead too. So, mm-hmm. I think the community of Warframe, at least, it is a unique community, to be honest, but they really do appreciate that level of engagement, and so they've continued it. So, absolutely, I think doing that is a good idea. What I hope not to happen, which I've seen, I'll say, Bloodlines 2, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, was doing that. Paradox was doing that. and then they sort of kind of stopped. The game got delayed, and all of the, I don't know, scary stuff that seems to be happening over there at Hard Hat, came out. So I hope that they continue it, because I think I agree with you. It's a good idea.
Right here, real quick, a little bit of behind the scenes stuff for this show chat. I recorded gameplay footage of almost every game that we're talking about today, and for Civ, I'm like, there's no way we're gonna talk about Civ for more than 6 minutes. So I recorded like a 5-minute video, and then it just ended, and it popped up stuff on the screen, and I'm like,
okay, we can move on, so you can not have any more technical difficulties.
No, I got to be ready for that stuff. So it's my fault. All right, our next category. Actually, we've got one category left, and then there's one other thing that we're going to talk about. So our final real category is called Most Anticipated Game for 2021. If you'd like to start.
Okay. Sure. So I'm going to be frank and honest with everyone. I just kind of threw a dart at this game. I have multiple ones that I'm excited about, but I'm not 100% sure any of them are going to come out in 2021, to be quite frank with you. So this is I was like, which one of all the games I'm looking forward to is actually going to hit in 2021? I'll go with Horizon Forbidden West. Now, I adored the first game. It is in one of my top 10 all-time bestest games. Kidley mentions the last Spider-Man game. Horizon Zero Dawn was mine. The whole thing was, there was nothing that I disliked about that game. Literally, and that is rare for me. I can always find something to complain about. I had very few complaints about Horizon Zero Dawn. I snickered when all these people, they released it on PC this year, and all these game devs were like, "Whoa, we didn't know this game was this good." And I was like, "Were you not paying attention the first time? Mm-hmm. Where were you when you were dogging out my game and saying Breath of the Wild was so much better? Y'all need to." Okay, I'm gonna get off the soapbox. Anyway, Horizon Forbidden West. I love this game. I'm going to try really hard not to get hyped, because I've done that and have been disappointed recently. So, but Guerrilla did such a good job on the first game. I mean, really, honestly, you played it, right, Kidley? You did.
I have, but I have not beat it. But I got it on PC now, so I'm gonna do a playthrough at some point here.
That game released, and it had few bugs. It was it is beautiful. Like, it released as a complete game. People put up Horizon Zero Dawn as an example of, hey, AAA people, you can release a game that's done, that's complete, to your people on time. Like, okay, what's going on? And it was great game. So really looking forward to see what the next chapter is and what they're going to do, especially after the last DLC that came out. They only released one. And I'm interested to see where they take the story. Yeah. So Horizon Forbidden West.
I think the only thing we know is that it's going to take place in the western part of the U.S.
Yep. And if you've played the first game, that was another little fun thing on the first game. It happens in the U.S., but it's post-apocalyptic. So the U.S. doesn't look like it did, but it's not scary post-apocalyptic. That's the really beautiful thing about Horizon Zero Dawn, is that they deliberately tried to make it not dark, gloomy, post-apocalyptic. It is kind of like Destiny in that it is this kind of green and these gorgeous, vistas and set pieces and whatever. But it happens in places that are actually fairly well known, like the Air Force Academy, Citadel, or the Chapel. If anybody's ever been to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. It's a very distinct building. It's actually in the game, but it doesn't look like it. So you have to like figure out, like, you're like looking at it going, and then you get this thing and you're like, oh my God, that's what that is. Um, so we've been slowly moving through the story. You're moving west during the campaign. So I assume they're going to pick up where you leave off as you're moving west. It actually happens in Colorado, and I had no idea about that until later, until I got to the end of the game, and I was like, "Oh my God, wait! I'm going into Arizona." I didn't know that. So, yes, so excited, and I hope they bring back my special um, Dino cheater armor, because I really enjoyed using my cheater armor. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, where 2020 has the potential to be a down year, but there are a bunch of games that have been announced. So for me, my most anticipated game for 2021 is Baldur's Gate 3. Here recently I've gotten into D&D with Mox and JT and some others, and I've always been a big fan of games that are like that. Even look like Dragon Age. It's similar in nature to that type of game, where Baldur's Gate 3 is using 5e or a modified version of 5e for D&D. And that's another studio that has, an incredible track record for making really good games. So hopefully that game will turn out and it'll be great. I mean, it's already in early access and everybody's already saying really positive things about it. So hopefully it'll turn out. I'll just mention a couple others here real quick. We've got the next God of War. I don't think that's coming out this year.
I don't either.
There's actually a game coming out in February called Outriders, which is going to be a Destiny competitor, and that game looks really good.
Or Mass Effect.
Yes.
Depends on how you go. I've heard both. That was another one that I debated on putting on here, but I had to be honest that it's Horizon Zero Dawn for me. But yeah, Outriders is another one I've had my eye on as well. And there was another one. What was the other one that kind of looked like Outriders too? But there's been some chatter about it that it looks good. It'll come to me later.
It looks like Outriders. Kenya Bridge of Spirits is another one that I'm looking forward to. That one looks good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, as far as Mass Effect, I think we all have a lot of hopes and dreams on what that could be. Hopefully it's done right.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We talk about that. I am looking forward to the remaster, which should be coming out next year. So, I mean, I own it, but I want to see what remastered means to buy it.
Yeah.
What does that mean exactly? And they're improving the combat of the first one, which I think you either love or hate it. And those of us who hate it with a fire of 1,000 suns. So I really want to see what that means exactly, but they're not adding content to it. Like, how does that work exactly? So I'm interested to see what a remaster looks to EA, because they are not generally in the business of remastering anything, and BioWare even more so. So,
I mean, can we think of anything that they have done?
What do you mean?
Have they done any remaster?
No, didn't EA come out and say we don't like to do them? Like, wasn't that like the thing? Everybody was like, we're never going to get a remaster because EA says they don't do remasters, and then suddenly we have a remaster. So I can't. I'm sure there is one. I think everybody does something at least once, but a port and a remaster to me are two different things.
Yeah.
So everybody else has done it. All of their bros. I mean, Bethesda's done one. Who else? that's kind of in the same genre as BioWare. Like, I'm having a mind blank, but I know specifically, like, Bethesda's done it, Gearbox has done it. Like, I except for EA Studios.
Yeah. Well, there's one more little subject that I wanted to talk about, and I think we will take a quick little break chat as we switch over to the second half of the show. But traditionally, we've had a category called the No Man's Sky Award, and it's essentially the biggest industry fail award. Funny enough, when we were putting together the show this year, which started like, I want to say in late November probably, I'm like, you know what, Alise, I'm just going to remove the category this year because there's been no problems. Everybody's been good. And then here comes Cyberpunk.
I would add an honorable mention to that, but it would be a controversial one at best. So we'll stick with Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And I don't want to dwell on this too much because it's already been talked to death by so many others.
Everyone.
But we were talking earlier about and now his name is forgetting me.
Rami
Ishmael. Thank you. So for those who don't know, Rami Ishmael, he is a developer in the gaming industry. He is very, very highly respected for helping developers out and just his knowledge and opinions and stuff like that.
They just closed their studio. He was co-owner of Lambier
Yep.
Games, and they just sunsetted their studio.
So he came out and said that the entire Cyberpunk ordeal is going to be an industry-changing event on multiple levels. When you kind of look back at what happened a little bit, you know, they didn't release review copies of the previous generation, and we now know why. Sony actually pulled it from the store, refunds, Microsoft issuing refunds, and he's just like, you know, like it's like checking boxes. It's like, this is going to change the industry. This is going to change the industry. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Cyberpunk down the road. Are they able to No Man's Sky it and bring it back? You know, what is this going to force developers to make sure that they release games that are 100% done and as bug-free as possible? I think a 100% bug-free game might be impossible or near impossible. You're always going to have a little something here or there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like, when you look at everything that happened with the game, it's just absolute mind-blowing.
I think it's also not only just that, just to play off what you were saying, but it's not just the game and the developers, but the industry itself is going to have to change. With the review copies, it wasn't just previous consoles. They didn't release console copies at all. Everyone had to play on PC. And you weren't allowed to record your own video. You had to use the developer-provided reel. SkillUp went into that on his review.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't allowed to use your own gameplay footage. You had to use Cyberpunk's. And all the folks who got their reviews out before the game release agreed to that. You gotta scratch your head a little bit about that just for a minute, don't you? Like, that they were willing to do that. I think that, you know, I'm not trying to, I sound judgmental. I'm not trying to sound really judgmental. People need to do what they need to do, right? To play the game.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just, those things are things that are suspect, that we've gotten to the point where people who want to get stuff from game studios to be able to do their jobs had to agree to. Is that ethical for them to have to agree to those things? You know, it releases, and all this stuff happens, but the game made its money back day one, like in spite of all of this. And they released their sales, for the first month, and they sold 13 million copies of this game, and that includes the refunds that were given. 13 million for a game that everybody says was a disaster. Like, what? And like, I played it. I have put almost 20 hours into this game. I don't think it's that bad. But again, I played it on the the Genie platform of Stadia. So
you played it on your phone. It's great.
I play it on my phone. I actually can. So, and I have enjoyed. Is the game perfect? Absolutely not. It flirted with my list because it very much reminds me of Skyrim when it released. And Skyrim was Game of the Year, undisputed Game of the Year that it came out. Skyrim is buggy as all get out. Don't let nobody try and say it's not, because it is. It still has bugs even after they did a special edition remaster of that game. There are still the same bugs in there that crashed the game the first time you play it. Go into any Dwemer ruin in that game and you will crash, depending on what you do. But the game still was amazing, and the things it got right. It was still amazing, and it changed gaming. And I don't think I'm being too hyperbolic there to say that it did. Dragon Age changed because of Skyrim. The developers came out and said that point blank, and you can line up a ton of games that released around Skyrim that Skyrim changed the way games are. So, it's Cyberpunk is like this unicorn, but just I could go into a long discussion about how I personally cannot stand the fact that we are selling stock in companies that have to create something. I don't see how this ends well, and that was one of the major factors. I don't remember if Rami had made a comment about that. He hit Cyberpunk on multiple days, multiple kind of topics, would bring it back around. So I don't remember if that was one, but I mean, the story is coming out that a lot of the rollout was due to meeting investor expectations. And now we have one or two of the investors are now filing a class action suit against the studio because the game is not going to meet expectations, or because of the rollout and the refunds and all that stuff. And they were sold a bill of goods that wasn't what they invested in.
And I'm gonna bounce off that comment here real quick. And that's my major issue with Cyberpunk is, again, I'm playing on a high-end PC. Looks great, runs great. All of that for me is fantastic. I am seeing a fair amount of bugs. Some of them I can duplicate. One being, if you run into a crowd of people, shoot off a gun, spin your camera around, all the NPCs disappeared.
Yeah, I've seen that on other people's things. Yeah,
but
they did that.
For me, the number one problem I have with this is they actually did No Man's Sky this a little bit. You can go back and look at some of the interviews where they talked about this feature is going to be in the game, this feature, that feature, whatever. And either those features are not in the game, or you can tell they put them in last minute. So, and there's another content creator that talks about this quite a bit, and I'm going to sort of steal what he said just a little bit. And he said that you can tell that they had a meeting at some point, probably like in July or something, where they the execs walked in or whatever and said, all right, this has to come out at this time. You got to stop whatever you're doing and just make this as ready as possible. So like the bounty system with the police that was supposed to be in the game, or just the police system in general, it's like you commit a crime and you can literally see them spawn around you. You go around the corner and they disappear. So, stuff like that where you can see they bare bones put in the system and they're like, we gotta ship it. And so that's just got how it's got to be. So it's just
a multiplayer. I don't anticipate seeing the multiplayer anytime soon. I don't even know if it's ever going to make it into the game at this point. They have so many other things, and you have to assume they have DLC, like, because they. The rumor is that they want to be the next GTA Online. This game was going to be their GTA Online, so they have additional content in the back that they made or working on right now, and and the multiplayer was probably one of those they were going to add, later as DLC or something. But who knows when that's going to come out?
Yep.
So, yeah, and how long is that going to take while they have to fix all this stuff they're getting sued for? I don't know, but it's unfortunate. It makes me sad because this company was the bastion, right, against corporate greed, right? Consumer focus. That it's like it's the studio that everybody used to hold up as always having consumers' best interests at heart, right? CD Projekt Red. They even would go out and make comments on their Twitter chastising the money grubbing tactics of other studios. And we will never do that. Okay, you didn't do that, but you did do this. So, I hope this does not lead us down a path that's going to take a long time to come back from and fix. But clearly this needs to be fixed because this was a royal screw up of epic proportions from a studio that should know better. Yeah, let's not even talk about the driving. You talk about the gun thing, mine is the god awful driving. I literally, there's quests in the game where you're supposed to drive. There's one really long quest that's supposed to be one of the best quests in the game, and I cannot do it very well. I'm not enjoying it like I should be because I cannot drive the car. Just, it's so bad. And anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely a subject that we could talk about for a long time. Yeah. But I think what we're going to go ahead and do here, chat, is we're going to get ready to switch over to part 2 of the show where we're going to unveil our top 5 games of the year. But before we do that, we'll give everybody an opportunity to get up and stretch. We'll take like about a 3-minute break or so. If everybody wants to do so, we'll come back and show you guys what our top 5 is. If that sounds good.
Yep, sounds good.
All right, everybody. Be back in about 3 minutes. So be right back.